The following was recorded in front of a live studio audience at the Studio 21 Podcast Café. This is the United Podcast Network.
And welcome to the Writer's Block. I'm Debbie Monk, Deborah Monk, empowering you to find your creative voice.
I'm Shelley Devlin, inspiring you to find your why.
And today we welcome back Barb Wallace to continue our series of the common mistakes of writing. Today we're talking about number 6, inconsistent pacing. At its basically, pacing is the speed with which your narrative unfolds. It's the rhythm or the balance of scenes or story events. Pacing can help set the mood and the tone of your story. So, Barb, or Shelley, do you have a little?
Well, I love Barb sent us all these notes,
yes, which
is
lovely.
fabulous. I feel like I'm gonna get a 3-hole punch, put them in a binder,
I know,
and refer back as my little
and publish them and get rich.
Encyclopedia Bible.
Right. She's going to publish them, sell them.
Publish something, Deb. But I love the analogy that you did with Goldilocks. And so this is what Barb wrote for our little analogy. Goldilocks walked into the library and saw 3 books on the shelf. The first book had a murder, a car chase, and a first kiss, all within the first 2 pages. This story is unfolding too fast, she said. The second book made her impatient. The protagonist was still climbing the stairs after 5 pages. This book is too slow, she grumbled. She picked up the third book. The action scenes were fast-paced. The romance storyline moved just slow enough to maintain the tension, even after the first kiss. Finally, she proclaimed, this book is just right. I was like, it sounded like Deb. It sounded like you wrote it. So how many years have you and Barb known each other? Because
a long time.
I think you might have rubbed off on each other a bit.
I think that might have been a little gift for me. Thank you, Barb. You're welcome.
That's awesome.
Yes.
Made sense. Totally.
Oh, good.
Yeah, it really...
Deb is just so speechless that she's pissed off she didn't write it herself.
I'm thinking. So, Barb, what are your thoughts on pacing?
All right. Generally, like you opened it up with my definition, it's the way events unfold. Ideally, you want to have moments of fast and slow in your story. It's kind of a mixture. A great metaphor, not the Goldilocks one, but is to look at it as your book as like a symphony. When you listen to a symphony that's in acts, you frequently have the beginning is one tone of music. I know people who listen to music a lot or listen to classical music, you'll have the first act is usually very fast-paced, and then suddenly it'll slow into a nice, slower middle movement, and then it'll finish with a big flourish and gigantic third part.
Crescendo. A
crescendo into it. So, well, they're separate acts.
Yeah.
So your book is going to be very similar. You're going to have moments of really, really high, fast-paced, quick scenes and some slow, meandering scenes where they have a time to enjoy the character, let the senses explore the scenes, to let things percolate and develop.
Right.
And then you're going to go back to fast. Excuse me, I'm choking. And then you're going to go back to slow, and you're going to kind of have a undulating, up and down, modulating kind of tone to your book. And when an editor comes back to you and says the pacing is off, usually what they mean is either it unfolded too slowly, it unfolded too quickly. If it's too slow, the reader's going to get bored. If it unfolds too quickly, they're going to lose interest just because they're going to be overwhelmed. They're going to be like, well, there's just way too much going on here. And it's usually a sign that you haven't put in enough detail. If you're getting to the high points quickly, or there isn't enough variation, it's just dragging out, or it's boom, 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 and there's no chance, no pauses in between.
Right. I kind of think of it as action. I almost think of it as my scene should be action scene, reaction.
Well, that's
scene.
exactly how a book should go. Action, reaction, action, reaction. Pacing means knowing if that reaction has to be written out, or if you can just mention it, or and vice versa. If that action has to be written out, or if you can just mention it in passing and go to. It depends on which is more important in your story.
Interesting.
I mean, generally, if you have a action-oriented book, in an action-driven book, you're going to have more fast-paced scenes. If you have a character-driven book, you're going to have more slow-paced scenes.
So, Barb, does it need to go up and down like that? Or I have a chapter called #CancerSucks. And I want the reader to feel tired in the beginning, because I talk about all the people that I've touched their lives and I've been in their lives through cancer. And so I want it to be short. You don't get to know the characters. You just get little, jibs and jabs. And I want it to be fast.
Weighed down.
I want you to feel weighed down by cancer by the time you get to the end of the story. when it says, just when I feel like I've got cancer mastered, I shave my mom's head.
Wow.
Isn't that brilliant?
It is brilliant. And actually, that's exactly what pacing should do.
Okay.
You're using the tone of your story and the fastness of it because it is something you want. You have a purpose for that.
Right.
You, that you're whipping out points is because that's not the time to sit and listen to each story in
No,
detail.
because God, you wouldn't want to finish reading the book if you
Exactly. And there you go. She has just described.
Right. And because
the-
it really isn't about that specifically. It's not about all those different people. It's about the fact that she thought she had it handled until.
Right.
And
the time you do want to spend the time with it is when your mother gets cancer and
And
you're
when-
shaving her head and your
Yes.
emotions. So that's when you would want to slow it down because that's when
Right.
the reader needs to experience it.
And I think
So it doesn't have to be up and down, but it does have to be balanced.
Okay.
Deb will remember, she bought this book, and I always remember it because the woman killed her mother on page 1.
well, I have a terrible memory.
On page 110, she still hadn't taken the body out of the house.
Oh, God.
Like she had killed her.
They're
and
just
then
starting to get a little ripe in that story.
It was, oh, no, I couldn't finish it. I remember complaining to you about the pace because,
I didn't write it. Did
no,
I?
you didn't write it.
Oh,
You bought it because you said something about, I killed my mother on a sunny day or something. You loved the opening.
oh, I would like that.
And but then she slowed it so down that chapter 5 she finally went to the kitchen to get the sponge to clean the blood,
Right.
and I lost interest. That's a case to me where the
pacing
pacing
is
was
off.
too slow.
So really, would you say that pacing gets dealt with in editing, or should pacing be addressed as you're playing out the story, almost like you need a separate storyboard for the pacing?
I think you need a separate storyboard for pacing.
Yes, Barb definitely does think that.
Well, I think it depends. If you
She's
are
very organized that way.
if you
I'm
are
so jealous.
If you are a plotter and you know your story, you can probably have an idea of pacing because you have your 3 acts and you know when your turning points are.
That would be you, Jonathan,
Correct.
Deb, and I, pantsters.
yeah.
Right.
We have no idea what we're doing.
I tend to be a little bit of both, but people that plot, you have your 3 acts and you have your turning points.
Yeah.
If you are a pantser, you're probably going to want to go back and make sure, hey, are my scenes hitting? Are my turning points hitting when they should be hitting? That is a big red flag. If you're not hitting your first turning point at the quarter mark and a turning point at the halfway mark and a turning point at the 3/4 mark.
Your story isn't going to work well.
Right. And that's even for any kind of story. Even a
Right.
memoir, there should be some point, 25% in, your story should take a turn.
An unexpected turn.
An unexpected turn and moved into a
direction.
not necessarily unexpected, but it should go into the next section, something that pushes it. So there should be a major scene at 25%. There should be a major scene at 50%. There should be a major scene at 75%. If you're writing a fiction, usually you have a major scene again at 90% that's going to drive home
black
the
moment,
climate.
right. And I think the pacing, though, is what's happening between those.
Right.
So so those are kind of the overall, that's the big far away view.
Right. So the
and then
first red
pacing-
flag is if you're not hitting those marks,
Right.
generally,
Right.
then your pacing is off. Then you want to know if your scenes are in the right order. Like you want to go look at that action-reaction thing again. If you have too many reaction scenes in a row or too many introspective scenes, and then action, you say to yourself, do all these introspective scenes need to be there? Do I need that much wordage? You want to look at your verbiage in those scenes. Do I need to stop while she's running for help? Do I really need to describe the weather and the stairs and the paint and the flowers, or do I need to cut a lot of that out?
Right.
Are the turning points coming too close together? That's again going to make sure, is it really at 50%, or is there enough space between those two turning points, or am I slamming things home one after another? And if I am, is there a reason for it? Is there a reason why I dropped 8 dead bodies in a row?
So many moving parts.
So many moving
So many
parts, yes.
storyboards.
Well,
Lots of Post-its.
No, it is. And that's why I say, well, Jonathan's right. You do it in the revision. Because
Right.
most of these things are not things you can figure out
In
beforehand.
the heat of the moment. right.
Exactly.
And I think, too, if you let yourself do what you're kind of naturally good at, I think I'm more inclined to do the introspective scenes. And those are the ones that come easier for me that I enjoy doing. But then I can see when I'm going back and reading, boy, that, we've spent a lot of time in our head. And so I can kind of see where I need to insert some action.
Right.
And so it's easier then for me to insert the action where I need it than it is for me to ahead of time think, well, where do I need the action? Because I don't necessarily
And to
know.
ask yourself if they're in the right order. Should this action be here, or should it be at the beginning of the book? Should it be in the middle? When you look at your bigger picture, that's one of the things you want to ask about pacing is everything happening the way it should unfold, or am I throwing things in too late that really should happen earlier, like revelations or whatever?
Is that the litmus test for knowing if your pacing is on or off?
What if the scenes are...
Just, as you were just describing, I had a different question in my mind, and then I changed my question.
Okay, yeah.
But how is it that you do detect the pacing? What's the best way to go about looking at your story and saying, okay,
it is again like, well, I think we've said it repeatedly. You want to look at your 3-act structure, and you want to lay out your scenes and ask yourself, do I have too many fast scenes in a row? Do I have too many slow scenes in a row? Are my turning points hitting at the right time? Are my scenes in the right order? Do I have too many introspective scenes lumped in the beginning and not enough in the end? You want to keep in mind what your genre is, and you want to take a look then at each individual scene and ask yourself, is the wording fitting the scene? Am I taking too much time to describe? Generally, if you're slow, it's because you're too wordy, you're too long, you have too much conversation that's unnecessary, you are overly introspective, you are repetitive, you have too much backstory. All of those things slow the narrative down. Conversely, if you're too fast, you will get to your big scenes quickly, which means your characters probably aren't developed. You probably aren't setting your scenes strongly enough. We talked about that a few weeks ago about really grounding your story in setting. You probably have vague settings. You might have very confusing narrative, meaning things are. If your critique partners read it and go, I'm not really sure what happened. He was over here and now suddenly he's in a bank. It means you're moving it too fast. You need to slow it down. Confusing dialogue, where you can't tell who's speaking. You don't understand why all these people are shouting what they're shouting. Or poor stage direction. Again, it's because you didn't slow it down to show what the characters were doing. And the most important thing to remember is that every scene serves a purpose. Every scene in a story.
Last show, she said every sentence serves a purpose.
That's what I said. There's
so
lot of
much
moving
pressure.
parts here. Lots of pressure.
It
I think
is.
I just rearranged part 2 completely in my head right now.
Notes.
It sounds like a lot of work, but nothing is you should not be wasting those words, and you should not be wasting those scenes. Not if you want to write a gripping
and if you want
book.
a person to keep reading.
Exactly. One of the best comments that I got was actually in New York. I was at a conference, and Damon Suede, who's a gay romance writer and an amazing teacher, if you ever get a chance to listen to him. But he said, one of the things you need to ask yourself is this scene necessary, or is the reaction of the character what you need in the scene? Because sometimes we'll spend 4 pages writing about a reaction when we really only needed 1 sentence that he was shocked. And then you can move the story forward. I mean, it might, if it's slowing it down, if you feel like we're spending way too much time before you get to the next scene, ask yourself, well, is this scene really needed?
What
is it that I'm needing? Is it the character's reaction? Is it the scene? Is it that 1 line of dialogue?
And if that's all you need, then that's all you use.
Right. And then you always want to have a variety. Even in a memoir, you want to have a variety. You do not want long passages of slow, unfolding.
Meandering.
Well, you want some. But like you said, you boom, boom, boom with all the different cancer patients and then slow it down.
Right.
And then I'm sure there's a part in the middle that it's going to go fast again because it's suddenly you hit the midpoint of the book and you need to turn it in a new direction, which is recovering from cancer or whatever.
And because you go fast, it makes that slowing down moment so
More
much
powerful.
more effective.
Exactly.
Right. Whereas if you just started this chapter with, I shaved my mother's head the day we've got her cancer diagnosed, wouldn't be as powerful as, just when I think I've got cancer handled.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
and then even the language you use in those scenes.
Yes.
Can slow or quicken a pace. So if you find in your action scenes, your sentences are very long.
Right. Short sentences.
Shorten them. Tighten them up. Less description, less dialogue. If even the dialogue you have is quick, to the point. People don't stop and have long conversations in the middle of an action scene. But you can, when you want to slow things down, that's when you take the time to write beautiful sensory images, beautiful language, slow it so people really feel the emotion of the scene.
I want to write beautiful sentences. Well, on that note. Thank you, Barb, for joining us again. If you want to hear this episode or share it with a friend, send them to UnitedPodcastNetwork.tv. That's UnitedPodcastNetwork.tv. You can find this podcast and the vodcast video on demand in case you want to watch it. Find this episode and all previous episodes on UnitedPodcastNetwork.tv, and please subscribe.
The views and opinions expressed by the hosts, guests, or callers of this program do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the Studio 21 Podcast Café, the United Podcast Network, its partners, or affiliates.